All right, your top, according to the Giant Take podcast, your top 5 offensive tackles in this year's NFL draft. And we're getting right into it, like Alex said. Number 5, J.C. Latham, the 6'6", over 340-pound Alabama junior. And I forgot how we were doing this for 1 second. Alex, I'm sending it right to you to get into his pros and cons.
Yeah, he's a guy who's really, really big, kind of like I guess, we're thinking comparisons, your Evan Neal types for Giants fans, your, Mekhi Becton types for Jets fans, both New York teams covered. It's interesting. This class has a lot of guys who are definitely on the much bigger side, a couple of which we're going to talk about today. And then there's a couple guys who are more on the undersized, Elijah Vera Tucker, who we obviously saw a few years ago out of USC, who's kind of that tackle guard mix. And there's one of those players today that we're going to talk about actually next after this. But I think overall it's a really interesting tackle class. And I think Latham, like, he's someone who's really big, right? But he can move really well in terms of his quickness, his speed. He's very, very strong as well, which is something you do see in the run game. Technique in the run game, not particularly impressive, but even in the passing game, he could deal with some of those really, really quick edge rushers. And I think that's a big positive for him. And his hand use is also very efficient for a guy his size. In terms of like some negatives there, he is a little bit over aggressive at times. And because of that, his footwork can kind of get sloppy. And that's something you see a lot in his film. So that's going to be something that needs to be coached up. But, all in all, a very, very solid prospect. And he's kind of, I guess, the bottom tier of this very, very strong first round tackle class.
And okay, so we go from now the pros and cons to what we love to do, and that is project where they will reach, give them a nice grade. And for anyone who's new here to that, well, first of all, I'd like to recommend that you go check out our other 2 positions that we've already graded, which is the top wide receivers and the top quarterbacks in this year's draft class. Obviously, those being the fun positions, you could say, quote unquote. And so go definitely check that out. And so what we do for anyone who is new, we use the point system that Alex has in place, where obviously it's 1 through 10, 10 being the highest. That gives them the better draft grade of where they're projected to get drafted in the actual NFL draft. Okay, so for Latham specifically, it is a 8.5 athleticism, 7 on the technique, 8 on pass blocking, 7.5 for run blocking, and a size grade of an 8. Obviously, 6'6", 342 pounds. It's a big guy. 7.8 is the total grade. He's projected to go in the mid-first round. Alex's grade puts him in the mid-first round. We move from number 5 to number 4. Troy Fatanu, 6'4", 317 pounds, a junior out of Washington. Now, this is another position, another Washington player we're talking about, Alex. I think in all 3 of our rankings here, position grades, whatever you want to call it, we've had a Washington player that we've spoken about.
Yeah, and I think that may continue with our next one too. I'm not entirely sure, but we'll have to wait and see. I guess everyone stay tuned for that. If Washington for every position, really strong team this past season. Yeah, it's interesting. I did mention, right, you kind of got that guard, type guard tackle flexibility. Elijah Vera Tucker-esque. Actually, our comp for this guy is Elijah Vera Tucker. So at 6'4", 317, he could be projected at either guard or as a smaller tackle at the NFL level. But his mobility, his burst up the field in the run game is really, really impressive. There's certain times where you see like small screens and stuff like that in Washington's offense, and this guy just rolls up the field, knocking over guys. It's really fun to watch. And I guess from the other standpoint, pass protection, his technique is really solid. His hands, his footwork. So it's really fun to see someone who's so polished playing the position against some guys who are definitely less polished generally on the defensive line, edge rushers. And his stance is really at an NFL level. I was reading something actually about him that he already kind of has an NFL quality stance in place, even ready to deal with some of these beasts of edge rushers that we have in the NFL at this current time. The only con for him is his run blocking is actually dramatically weaker than his pass protection, based on what I've seen. And, he just doesn't really he just doesn't seem to really find his block, whether it's in a zone scheme or whatever it may be. He just really seems to struggle with that. And I think coaching that up, he definitely has the skills. He's got the athleticism. He's got the mobility to do so. And I think at the NFL, yes, it's a con right now, but it's something that you can project as going to improve going forward.
Obviously, that is going to affect his grade in that slot of run blocking, where I'll get to that in a second. For right now, I'll talk about his athleticism, which is an 8 on the scale. Same thing with his technique. The pass blocking, which is the most impressive, at a 9 out of 10. The run blocking, it's a 6.5. The one con that Alex mentioned. The size, a 7. He's not 6'6". He's only 317 pounds. But that does total out still to a better grade than what we talked about for Latham, and that's why he's number 4. That's why he has a 7.9 overall grade. And same thing, though, projected mid-first round. The grade matches that in the in the middle of the first round. I don't know where I was going for there. All right, number 3, and of course it's like the hardest name that I can never get, but I believe it's Talib.
By the way, all these guys really have tough names, which is kind of funny. Except for number 1, of course, he's got a very, very, very simple name. But yeah, all these guys got
through it for now. I've flown through it for now. Yeah. A guy we've talked about before, though. I remember talking about Fuaga. You can kind of interchange those, I think. But what I will say about him is he's 6'6", 324 pounds out of Oregon State, a junior coming into this year's NFL draft, and he's number 3 on our list.
Yeah, a really, really good run blocker, kind of the opposite of Fatanu, who we just talked about. He's really, really strong in run blocking. He's really physical in the run game. He's really aggressive in the run game. He's got really good leverage in terms of pass protection. His pad level is good. So, he's solid in both aspects. Definitely a slightly stronger run blocker than pass protector, but obviously, it's negligible to the point that I don't think it's super significant. It was significant enough in our scores to change that a little bit. I just want to preface that before Josh reads that off in a minute. Cons for him, his footwork needs to be worked on by some NFL coaches for sure. He just beats a lot of these guys based on his speed, his athleticism, his physicality. And obviously in the NFL, you can't do that as easily. And he just needs to technique-wise improve from that aspect. And then he's a little bit over-aggressive at times. You can see that certain penalties, just sometimes even being over-aggressive and missing a block because of it. So that's something he's going to need to focus on as well. But a really, really elite prospect. And, these, I'd say from even 5 to 2, I think is really, really, really tough, really, really close. And all these guys are really, really close together in how I graded them. And there's even a couple more guys I think you could even slide into that conversation that we're not even talking about. So a really, really good tackle class. And Fuega is just another really good member of it.
Obviously, kind of bumping off what you were saying. You said they're all, 2 to 5 basically in that same range of mid-first round. I'm going to spoil it a little bit. Our grade matches that for Fuega here with an athleticism score of 7.5, technique of 7, pass blocking of 8, run blocking of 9, and size of 8. I flew through that, but it was all to say that he's a 7.9, which is the same grade as Fatanu, and a 0.1 score higher than someone like Latham at 5. So really kind of interchangeable where you want to put these players. Is there anything you want to say before I went to the next guy? Or
no, okay, I mean, I think you touched on everything I was going to say, so you go for it.
All right. Well, maybe I wanted to give myself a chance to kind of sound this one out. Number 2, Alumiwa Fashanu is my attempt at that name. I completely apologize to Penn State and NFL draft fans out there who was a fan of Fashanu. I will refer to his name as Fashanu for now, as that is his last name. 6'6", 312 pounds, a junior out of Penn State. Syracuse is in the ACC. We didn't play against Penn State. Maybe I would have known that if we were in the Big Ten. We are not. That's my excuse. It's not a valid one. Alex, If you want to attempt that first name, go ahead. We'd like to.
I'm good, Josh. But what I will tell you, I don't know if you noted this. We got Fashanu. We just talked about Fuaga, I think is Fuega.
Yeah.
And then we also had Fuatanu. 3 F last names in a row. In case anyone cares. Anyway, I just noticed
that joke.
I felt like I had to say it. But anyway, no one really cares. Fashanu, he's an athletic freak. He's someone that you see when he plays, he's just at a different level of athleticism than anybody else on that offensive line, and sometimes even the defensive line. He's like he could probably be a running back. He's so athletic in the way he can move. He's really fluid as a pass blocker. His footwork and his foot speed is elite already, and stuff that probably doesn't need to be worked on, which is different from a few of the guys we talked about already. And the only thing you could really say outside of his, besides, I guess, from pass protection to run blocking, I don't know where I was transitioning there, Josh. Going from pass blocking to run blocking is that he's just very inconsistent in the run game. Like sometimes you'll watch and you're like, wow, this guy, he gets to second level really quickly. He's there, he's really picking up his blocks, and he's making big plays all over the place. And then like the next game you'll watch like film, and you'll say, like, why is he not like he's not making those same blocks? He's not getting to the second level as easily. Like I guess maybe it's various like different competition, but like you'll look at like two games even at like against the same caliber teams, and it's just different. So very interesting there, and he's kind of inconsistent in that aspect. So that's the only reason why his run blocking grade was probably a little bit lower than his pass blocking grade, because I think at their peaks they're both pretty solid. And I was just a little bit confused by that. But in terms of his athleticism as someone you can project at the next level in the NFL, he's going to be someone that coaches are going to be really, really excited about and ready to get their hands on and work with him.
And he's an athletic freak, and that's why his athleticism score is a 9 out of 10. His technique is 7.5, pass blocking an 8, run blocking, like Alex mentioned. The one con, because it's there, it's apparent, but it's something that can improve, and that's why it's still a high score of a 7.5. That's why he's still number 2 on this list. And then 7.5 in the size category, which is a little bit interesting because you put size in an 8 for J.C. Latham, who's also 6'6".
Well, I'm talking about weight a little bit, right? 312 for Fashanu. Latham, you're talking, what were we saying? 342. So yeah. He's a little bit slim for that height, which is something I'll talk about with the next guy as well. Kind of a con for him. But yeah, so when you're 6'6", I mean, I think generally more in that 325 to 330 range is normal. So both it was just Fashanu actually who fell into that category, who's just a little bit undersized from that aspect, but that's why he's still over a 7, which is kind of like the average.
And overall, our first 8 in this category, an 8.0 for Fashanu, and projected to be a mid-first round pick. That's, according to all those draft experts out there, including Daniel Jeremiah, who has him at 14 in his mock draft. But Alex, he has him as an early first-round grade, and we'll have to see as we get closer if those draft experts agree with him.
Yeah.
But for right now, we go to number 1, which is there's no debate here of who this number 1 player is for everyone, and that has to do with his absurdly, I guess, tall and long frame, which Alex will talk about in a little bit. At 6'9", 321 pounds, the junior out of Notre Dame, Joe Alt, who is projected to be within the top 10 for most draft boards. Just an absolute unbelievable stat line when you looked, not even stat line, but I guess just a fact of how tall he is at 6'9".
Yeah, I mean, he's just different from pretty much any player we've seen in recent years at 6'9", 321. So that's what I was kind of alluding to, that, probably at 6'9", you're looking more like 330, 340. But because of that, he can be so nimble on his feet. His balance is fantastic for someone who's practically a 7-footer. He's really light on his feet. He can move around well. He's so tall, and he has such a long frame that just nobody can get around him. He finishes blocks really strongly. He's great in pass protection, technique-wise, power-wise, whatever it may be. Run blocking, he's really good as well. He gets to the second level. The only con is I did mention he's good with power in the pass game. Sometimes it feels like in the run game with his power, he doesn't really utilize it fully. And maybe that's to do with the fact that he is a little bit lighter than you probably would expect for someone who's 6'9". But overall, I mean, that's such a small con that it really doesn't matter at all. And he's just such an elite prospect, and definitely one of those gems, and definitely a top 5 prospect in this class. And I hate using the word generational at the tackle position. I hate using the word generational altogether, but I think you could classify him potentially as a generational prospect alongside Marvin Harrison Jr.
So the grade that we have here is an early first round pick, even a top 5 at that, if not every single quarterback and Marvin Harrison go in the top 5. His projection, like I said, early first round, a top 10 pick. I think Jeremiah in his 3.0 had him as a 9th pick in the draft this year. Athleticism is an 8.5, technique an 8, pass blocking a 9, run blocking 8.5, size a 9. What a hell of a grade here. 8.6 for Joe Alt. Alex, do we have an update on if that is the
Yes.
top?
He's joint top. He's joint top technically,
with who?
but top. Marvin Harrison Jr. and then Caleb Williams and Drake May right below him. Yeah, below those two guys. Yeah, so joint top.
Tied for Alex's highest grade in this year's NFL draft. Do we know if that and I think those guys this year are higher than anyone that we had last year. I don't think there was anyone at 8.6 last year.
No one was that high.
So
the only guy who was that high was Kyle Hamilton.
Before, it was a quote-unquote weaker draft class a year ago, but obviously those guys still panning out in the NFL. Okay, so again, just one more time from 5 to 1. I get to read these names again. Yippee. Number 5, J.C. Latham. Number 4, Troy Fatanu. Number 3, Talizi Fuaga. Number 2, Olumuyiwa Fashanu. And number 1, Joe Alt for your 2024 offensive tackle rankings on the Giant Take podcast.